Boom.
This shit's fire.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another live Pin the Gas podcast on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. And ladies and gentlemen, I have one special for you. The legend himself, Mike Spike Edwards. He's raced with Jason Pridmore, the Northwest 200, BSB, the Suzuka 8-Hour, the Bador. Man, he has done everything. But before we get into his journey, this episode is sponsored by Next Level Financial. Take control of your financial future. Get your complimentary financial analysis today by Seth Starnes. And Mike, I tell everybody this: don't spend your hard-earned money on an off-the-rack suit, because for 90% of us, it's not going to fit you correctly. When you have a leather suit that don't fit you correctly, man, it causes all kinds of issues on the motorcycle. I mean, there's all kinds, right? So my recommendation is bisontrack.com. Robert and Tasha and Carter are some of the most amazing people you're going to meet. And one thing that stands out between Bison and everybody else, I don't know if you have somebody like this out there in the UK, but Bison goes to every Moto America track, right? So if you go out there, Mike, and you have a fall, you come back, you need a little stitching done or something colored in, you know, your one of your sponsors' logos re-sewn on there, they'll take care of you right there and put you right back out. But before your next session, also, Mike, if you're not in a Bison suit and you're in a Spike or an RST or whatever it is, you can go straight up to them, and guess what? They'll take care of you too. So to me, that's what separates them from all the other manufacturers when it comes to making leathers, because you can't take an Alpine Star today and easy and say, I need this fixed. They're going to be like, absolutely not. You need to take it back over there. Right. Good luck. Exactly. So to me, that's what makes Bison plus who they are, man. I just love, they're so great. So bisontrack.com, they had a Black Friday sale going on. Christmas is coming up right around the corner. So treat yourself to it. I got the chest protector, I got the gloves, I got the suit, man. You guys know the deal. Bisontrack.com. But ladies and gentlemen, it's an absolute honor to finally sit down with Mike Spike Edwards. Mate, what is up?
Thanks for inviting us, Chris. I just thought I'd sort of pop in and drop in and say hi to everybody and introduce myself for those who don't know me. I mean, if you drop onto my website and have a little scout around there, there's plenty to look at and amuse yourself. Lots of photos, lots of videos. Yeah, I'm a sort of a journeyman really when it comes to sort of racing. 43, nearly 44 years in to racing. Don't quite know anything outside of racing really. It's kind of been my sole life, as it were. Can't think of it. I'm only going to stop when the nail the lid on. How's that?
Yeah, right. Mate, I mean, your journey's been so long and you've accomplished so much, right? It's absolutely amazing. Everything you've done. And a lot of, probably a lot of the Americans, you know, they have no idea, you know, and that's why I love getting legends as yourself on here, because it opens their eyes to, another side of racing, and also the glory days, because racing today is nothing like it was back then, you know.
It's certainly evolved
a lot, right?
Well, whether it's a positive evolution or negative, it certainly has changed a lot. I mean, obviously, I think most people, when they start racing, they start kind of at like low-level club racing. They may have come from off-road sports, as your schoolboy stuff, and came through that sort of route, which was kind of my route really. But then you do club racing and you kind of think you've discovered a new world, which you have. And then you kind of get to sort of the top of the pile in the club world and think you're the daddy in that. And then you start doing nationals, and then it's like a plunk, you go straight to the bottom of the pile again. You think, oh, guys. And they start climbing that ladder again. And it's about life, really, isn't it? It's about sort of trying to keep climbing that ladder, because no matter how fast you think you are, there's always somebody out there a little bit faster than you.
It is.
So yeah, it's kind of I've not really, even though I'm into different stuff other than racing. You know, I do a lot of coaching work now, online and on track coaching. for me, that's kind of a bit more like a payback, as it were. You mentioned it in our off line chat, and it is kind of payback for me because the sport has been really good to me. I enjoyed it. It's given me a life, and you can't physically give anything back in the sense of contributing anything other than yourself. So yeah, I stroll around at various race circuits with clients all over Europe, wherever anyone wants to take me, really, because they take me as opposed to me. I don't want to feel like a prostitute, as it were, rocking up to a circuit, saying, "Right, come on, who wants me?" I don't go down that route. But yeah, it kind of works for me, and I'm really enjoying it. Yeah.
Listen, it's you're right, and it's funny you say that, and what you're doing, giving back. I think there's a lot of people that gave their whole life to this sport, right? In that beautiful journey, always wants to give back to it. So everybody's coming up with a way to give back to it. In coaching, I have a lot of friends that's don't professionally race that actually do coaching now, and they absolutely love it. Because I feel like you've been racing so long. If you get out of racing and you don't ever ride again, I think there's such a big void in your life, right? You're trying to find something else that gives you that feeling, that replicates that feeling and that love and that passion, and you just can't feel
Not
it.
going to find it.
So what do you do?
Hey, I always tell my clients that because it's a sort of almost a 50-50. I do a lot of track day guys and I do a lot of races as well. And for the track day guys who are kind of want the next step, which is kind of let's go racing scenario, I said, you're going to lose your virginity here, mate, because literally when it's your first race and you're running down to turn one, your first race, your first start, when you're screaming inside your helmet, you will never get that back. And to me, it sounds a bit bizarre, but I'm envious of them. When I go to a track day now and I see the novice group going out onto track and they're all shitting themselves and they're all wobbling down pit lane, and I'm envious because I know what's in front of them, and they have, of course, absolutely no idea. And I've lost that. I can never get that back. And it sounds a bit bizarre, I know, but I know everyone's got to start somewhere, obviously. But no, it's fantastic. It gives me a real buzz. That's the best way to describe it. And of course,
absolutely.
You've got to accept that everybody has a level, and a lot of people will kind of plateau with their ability. And that's a lot of times where I kind of come in, because once you've plateaued, you need to develop as a rider and a person sometimes to move on to the next step. For those who perhaps don't think they need coaching, they just ride faster. Well, the thing with that is if you don't accept that you've got to change something to move forward. I mean, I think it's a definition of insanity is repeating the same thing and expecting a different result. So if they don't change something in what they do and their technique or whatever it is on the bike, all they're going to do is be sat in the gravel saying, what happened there? So change is part of it. So, and that's great for me because it's great to see riders develop. And I've taken some people from very, very early days in riding full stop. I mean, 2000, when would it be now? No, 93, 4, something like that. I used to run an on-road school, teaching people how to drive, doing basics from car park work onto the road, passing the bike tests and so on. And that was a big kick, seeing, taking complete raw people and giving them the confidence to get out there. And then watching them come out of the test centre with the biggest stupid grin on their face in the history of the world. All they've done is pass the bloody bike test. But for them, it's a Mount Everest that they've just climbed, and you've done your bit to get them there. And then that kind of translates when you come onto the racetrack and you get someone who looks at the timesheet and they're sort of wallowing down towards the bottom somewhere, and they just look at the times towards the top and they think, well, I'm riding as fast as I can, and this guy's doing 11 seconds faster than me. And they're looking at the track saying, where am I going to find 11 seconds? So that's where I come in, breaking it all down, what they're doing on the bike, etc. And then seeing them start to climb the timesheet. And it's just again, it's just brilliant. Love it. Love it.
It is, and you made a great point, man. I never thought about it like that before. I remember my first race. You're right. I was giddy, nervous, excited, didn't know what to expect. You kind of think you know what to expect. Absolutely not, right? And then the whole buildup, and after that, it's almost like you're chasing that same buzz again, right? You're trying to replicate that same buzz. It's just like the first time you drag your knee, Mike. And I know because you coached for a long time, but that's probably one of the first things people want to do. I want to drag my knee. I want to get that feeling, right? And when you finally get that knee down, oh man, that's something else you'll never forget.
It's really funny when you're following somebody and it's their first knee down, and you can see them physically jump. That's like, oh Jesus, like an electric shock on the bike. And then the next corner you get to, you can see him like, firing the knee into the ground, sort of thing. It's something I don't do because I'm sponsored by Whiz knee sliders, and Whiz are made up with me because my sliders, they wear out of old age rather than wear out through dragging on the floor. Because I literally, it's in an extreme scenario when I get my knee on the floor, just because I ride old school. I'm not exactly a Mike Halewood, but I don't do a lot of, Marc Marquez and the like, Jorge Martinez. That ain't me on a bike. I look at them guys doing that and I think, I'll leave that to you, lads. Completely. Yeah, I can see why they do it and the need for it, etc. But it's just not my cup of tea at all.
It's that goes with the evolution of motorcycles and all the electronics and the lean angles. Plus, a big part of that too has to go with the tire technology, right? The tires are on now are like far superior to when you was racing in British Superbikes and all that good stuff. It's now they're and the body positions change. Now the knee is right there. I mean, the elbow's where the knee is, and Jorge, like you said, dude, he's dragging his whole freaking forearm and shoulder. It's like, what are we doing here, right? Like this, it's awesome to see. But then you watch an old video of Mick doing where it's more like sort of a supermoto kind of putting a bike down, still shoulders upright, not so much leaned over, but still getting his knee on the deck. And then, but to me, that's
strange. It's strange you mentioned Mick doing because from the coaching perspective, a lot of people come to me, particularly the track day guys, and they rock up with a fixed idea in the mind that they look at MotoGP or World Superbike or whatever, and they see this I call it extreme body positioning, and they think they have to do that, so they're riding around at like zero pace, and their focus is hanging off the bike when it's totally unnecessary at the pace they're going. And because it burns up so much of their energy, physical energy, moving around on the bike, plus so much of their thought process goes into that as well. I said, look, just forget about that for the moment. That's one of the last things that you should be thinking about. Oh, but clearly, if they're doing something which is horrendous and totally wrong, but if you look at historically, look at the way the body position has been developed, if you will. It went in fits and starts, really, and often you find some of the things when it kind of happened, the evolution happened, is often because of a technical improvement, whether it's suspension or tires technology. Basically, more grip allows you to go faster, lean the bike more, etc. But no, the body position is one of the things I get a little wound up about, because a lot of times people, they want to look 1,000 mile an hour when they're going at no mile an hour. So I said, look, if you want to sort of focus on anything, focus on the bigger hills to climb for a lot of people, than getting the body position right. And I can see, I totally get on board with ultimately that's the way you need to go. But you've got to go around corners and brake and turn and get in throttle development and lots of other stuff you've got to sort of master first. And then the body position is something, by that point, you will have evolved a little bit anyway, naturally. And then you can sort of tweak it towards the end to where you actually need to be. And of course, if you've got a guy who weighs, you're in pounds, aren't you? Sometimes I'm in kilos. Yeah. If you get a guy who's sort of like 60 kilos, he has to move around quite a lot on the bike to have a big impact on the bike. Where if you get a guy who's fairly thick set, tall guy who's maybe 150 kilos. He only has to move his ass off the seat a little bit, and he's having a big effect on what happens on the bike. So these big guys, relatively speaking, don't have to move a lot to make a big effect. So for those people, they would look, to be frank, a bit bloody stupid trying to hang off the bike like your MotoGP guys. And if you walked around the paddock and you look at these MotoGP guys, I'm not saying they're all skinny little runts, but they're all skinny little runts. They all tend to be of a certain size and type. So that's kind of, they almost need to do that, as it were. Have I gone off base there a little bit?
No, absolutely not. And you're right, right? The bigger guys, because they got so much more mass and so much more, I don't want to say muscle, but I guess just brute kind of strength that, yeah, they can muscle the bike around to where the smaller guys need to be strong too, right? But they have to move around a lot more to get that bike to bend how they need it and all that good stuff. So
Yeah.
no, absolutely, man. We actually have a couple comments come in right now. Adam Brown, a good mate of mine out there, dude. BSB, what's up, Adam? He says, "What's up?" And then Helen Bennett, she's a good friend of mine. She works in the media center at BSB. I met her at Cadwell Park last year when I went.
Helen, yeah. Oh,
Yep.
Helen.
She says, I was his brawly dolly once at Superbikes when he was racing on the Ducati.
Yeah, she's a lovely old girl. Lovely, lovely girl.
I love Helen. She's absolutely amazing. So, Mike, tell us your journey, man, of getting your first bike, track days to multiple BSB 400cc, 600cc's, the Macau, the Northwest 200. I mean, the Suzuka 8-hour, Predmore, man, there's so much to talk about. But
we're just not going to get there to get through all that lot. But the journey for me really started going back to when I was the youngest of four in the family. My brother was the eldest of four. He's 11 years older than me. He got to bikes obviously well before I did. I was only knee high to a grasshopper, and he had an accident on the road and ended up losing a leg. So the biking was put to one side, and we did a lot of power sports. My father and my brother raced powerboats for years, and that was the competitive side of it, was going there. So I've always been involved with the idea of being competitive. So that's been bubbling along under the surface. They then came back into bikes later on when I was like, I don't know, 11, 12, something like that. And I got a motocrosser and did reasonably well, but I wasn't kind of into it, sort of thing. And then got a trials bike and started to do trials. And that was kind of more my thing. I enjoyed that a bit. And then come 16, it's time to go on the road. It turned into a bit of a Looney Tune on the road. And when I got my first 250 when I was 17, I was tearing around like stupid. I had two speeds. I was either stopped or on full gas everywhere. And it was only going to end one way, and that wasn't great. And I had a couple of very near do's and a couple of hospital visits. And my dad, even though he didn't want to discourage me, he sort of said, look, he said, I'd really like you to sort of think about the idea of going racing. Because my dad used to run in the 70s, used to run the Michelin tyres race service at all the GPs, British Championships, all that sort of thing. So I've been going to bike racing, for years, but I wasn't really that interested in biking. Well, not biking, but the racing was kind of something that happened in the background. All I used to do was I'd arrive at the paddock, and my dad would hook us up with someone who had a paddock bike, and I used to tear off on the paddock bike and disappear till it went dark, and then come back and there'd be hell on because I'd nicked the paddock bike all day. So that was kind of where I was then. But once I got on the road, I still really wasn't that positive at going into racing because I wasn't that bothered about it, And then my dad said, look, come, we'll go to because again, this is 1981. And there wasn't such things really then as track days. It was kind of, if you wanted to go on track, you went racing. So you went straight into the deep end, as it were. So I just didn't do it. So there was a guy called Chas Mortimer, who was a racer of that era. And he ran a race school, a motorcycle race school. So he knew me dad because of the Michelin tyre hookup thing. So we zoomed across to Oulton Park and went on one of Chaz's race schools, which was awful. It was absolutely pouring down. It was about 2 degrees, bitterly cold. And we had to ride there. I had to ride there on a bike anyway, so I looked like a drowned rat when we got there, sort of thing. So I wasn't in a positive mental state. I rode around Alton Park, and it was on a Kawasaki KH400, which wasn't a great race bike anyway. And then the middle cylinder, the exhaust pipe fell off, so I had to come in. And after 2 sessions, I said, "That's it. This is not interested. I want to go home." So we all stormed off home. And I was first to get home, by the way. We all got home, and he said, "I'd still like you to think about the racing thing a bit," but no, wasn't interested. Anyway, my dad was a clever dude, and he said, "Right, a friend of his had a GS1000 in a Formula One chassis," and he said, "Can you get Mike to come along and kind of help with moving tires and putting the bike on the stand and just all sort of the background work," which I was really into because the mechanic in it, I loved fiddling with bikes. So I went along and helped Jack with the bike and got him to the warming up area and got him out and came back in and took his helmet and this, that, and the other. Because I was the gopher in the background. It flipped a switch in my head. I thought, I've got to do this. This is the bollocks sort of thing. Really, I've got to do it. And that was it. I went home from that meeting. That was a local meeting at Aintree in Liverpool. I went home from there. The 2 road bikes I had, immediately sold them. Sold my car, sold everything I could have to buy one kind of race bike. I had to buy another car stupidly because I realised I had to sort of drag the thing about. And I went in the black hole, which is racing sort of thing. And I've never turned me back since then, really, just never stopped. I've always had an interesting thing, I think, or some people think it's interesting, even when I've been involved with some professional teams, works backing and all the rest of it, at British Championship, world level, etc., I've always maintained a job of some sort, not a background job, but, that was me. The job was where I earned my money. The racing was a hobby. Because what I didn't want to do was something I love to do is treated it as a job. Like you put your leathers on, you go into work, because that can be really potentially demotivating if you're on a bit of a dip, for instance. If it's your hobby and you're having a bit of a dip, you just climb out and you crack on. So I've always worked, but it's the job, to be fair, has fitted in with me racing sort of thing. So they've had to sort of be, I don't know what the word is, they've had to hook up quite well together. But no, the racing was almost a necessity of staying alive as much as anything else. Being competitive, even now, I still race now and I really enjoy it. But I don't ride around making numbers up. I still go out with the idea of I think I could do really well. I'd like to go where there's nothing like stepping on the top step. There's nothing like it at all. But if I have a really good race and I'm just second or third or even fourth or fifth, and I've had a really cracking race, it's still good for me.
Oh, for sure. It's again, the whole journey, and I'm like you when it comes to this podcast, man. It's I don't do it to, like, I don't even look at my followers or how many views or any of that. Why? Because I don't care, because it's my passion and I want it to stay a passion. I don't want it to feel like, oh, I got another podcast to do today. I got to put this hat on and put this smile on and clock in, right? Because then it's dull and it's not fun anymore, right? We're doing this because we love it and it's our passion. It's our hobby.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I don't go out and, seek sponsorships to get paid for the podcast or any of that, Mike. I do it because I love it and I want to give back to the sport, and I'm such a fan of it. I still can't believe, and it blows my mind that I get to sit down with legends as yourself and have these conversations, that I've been fanboy of for such a long time. And to me, that's my payment, and being mates afterwards and doing a part 2 and a part 3 and everything in between that goes along with it. That is my payment, so but everything else that comes along is just a bonus, right? But I don't look at it as, there is a lot of people that always tell me, dude, you need to start, sponsorships and this and that and need to get paid. And I'm like, even my mom, she's hard on me. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that, because then it's a job. I already got a full-time job, right? I don't get to ride as much as I used to, but I can podcast all the time. and tell everybody
Yeah.
else's story and journey and sit here and have a mega really good time. Exactly what we're having right now, and that's again is payment enough for me, man. So
Good.
absolutely. So listen, you've had a long journey, a long career. I mean, there's so many stats, like you said, there's no way we're going to be able to get to a third of them, right? So we will definitely do a part 2 and get more in depth. And we'll do like, I don't know, a 2-hour podcast and get more in depth but I do want to talk a couple things as far as like the 1993 Northwest 200, right?
Right.
Absolutely. Northwest. So I got the Southern 100 hat on. I don't have a Northwest, and it is Ugly and Company. I got it out there.
Right.
But I'm a huge
So
fan, obviously.
the Northwest is obviously it's in the northwest of Ireland.
Yeah.
It's a 9-mile road circuit. It's basically a triangle with lots of wiggly bits and a couple of roundabouts and that sort of thing. They've added to the circuit over the years. They've changed it a little bit to try and improve the safety, because riding on the road is inherently dangerous. And there was a couple of corners there which, if you got them wrong, it wasn't a good day at the office. So they put chicanes in and a couple of little roundabouts in. And to a certain degree, I've not done the circuit for a great number of years now. And when I last rode it, it was still fairly original, as it were. So there was 2 or 3 corners there which you kind of held your breath going through them. But that for me was about treating them with respect and not being, and the guys who are with you is, you potentially could dive underneath somebody, but that wouldn't be a good corner to try it on. So you timed it so you did your attack somewhere else, and you make sure everyone gets through those kind of dodgy bits. But no, my first Northwest was 91 on a 750 OW1 750 Yamaha. And it amusingly was, we kind of arrived at, it was my first year in Superbike, and I got this 750 Yamaha, and it was as good as it gets, from a privateer's point of view. It was a great bike, really quick, handled, stopped, turned, it did everything really well. But I'd not done the roads before, so it was my first road event. And we kind of got there, and we drove around, and we had a big van then. It was great. And we drove around the circuit for a few laps, and I was a little bit thinking, "Oh, for Christ's sake, what this isn't going to be good." I thought, well, I'll give it a go. I've come here to race, sort of thing. So you get a Thursday night and a Friday practice. So I went out on the first night. Oh, just before I went out there, it was about an hour before they closed the roads. And this is something that I absolutely adore about the Irish road racing circuit. Was a guy came round to the paddock, and he had a photograph out on them. He got a photograph of me. I'm not sure where from. And he asked me to sign. It was great. Put my name in that. He said, "That's your first time here." And he was made up. He said, "It's your first time here." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Have you been around the circuit before?" I said, "Well, we've done a couple of laps in the van." Without anything at all, he just dug his hands in his pocket and said, "I've got a CBR 600. There's the keys. Go and take a few laps." It wouldn't happen anywhere else. Anyway, I took a few laps, and it was quite good. And then the practice, I did the first practice and came in, did 4 laps of practice, came in, parked the van in the Orne, and said to my dad, "We're off. There's no way I'm doing this place. It's suicide. The bike's kicking me up the arse. I've nearly hit the curb a few times. It's just mental." And walking past the awning was an Irish racer called Brian Reid. And he was my teammate about 2 years before in the British Championship stuff. And he overheard what I was saying, and he came and said, "Oh, no, Mike, I'm not going to do the accent." He said, "Oh, no, Mike," he said, "you've got to ride it like a horse. Let the bike jiggle about underneath you. Ride, take some weight off your bum. Ride it like a horse," sort of thing. I thought, this guy's on drugs. He might as well have been. But I thought, I'll give it a try. Next session, I'll give it a try. And because there's some really bumpy bits there. And on those really bumpy bits, I just totally relaxed, kept the throttle pinned, and just let the bike jiggle around. Transformed it. I thought, brilliant. I'll give the race a go. Then the rain came, and it was a drizzly, horrible, typical Northern Ireland morning, first Superbike race. And I qualified in the first wave, because a bit like Daytona, the 200, they have two waves because there's that many people in it. in the first wave, shot off down to York, the first court, first sort of hairpin thing, came up onto the straight, and we come up onto the long Coleraine straight, and you're flat out for about 4 miles, something like that, just revving the rods out of the bike for about 4 miles. And you're just in the bubble sort of thing, looking through the screen. And all of a sudden, the screen went, you could see the raindrops pouring off the screen. All of a sudden, it all emulsified, and you couldn't see through the screen anymore. And it was Philip McCallum on the Works Honda. He was up in front, and his bike had blown up and covered everybody behind him in oil, because it like emulsifies and goes, phew. And of course, it hit their visors and hit the screens. And I was still down behind the screen when it happened. So when I'd slowed down and sat up, I'd missed most of the shit, as it were. So everyone's going really slow trying to wipe the visor. And the worst thing you can do is wipe the visor, because you then can't see anything. So on the first lap round, probably half of the field pulled into the pits to have new fresh visors. And I went straight through because my visor was clean. So my first lap, I was in second place. And I thought, I don't really want to be here. And I thought, just keep it on, just keep it upright, just keep it upright. Because it didn't really matter, because it was where the oil was in the straight. So it wasn't an issue in that respect. But you just couldn't see a damn thing. So I managed to finish the race and finish fifth. So I thought, right, second race, I'm up for this now. I know where the course goes. I'll give it a whirl. And unfortunately, on the warm-up lap, the bloody throttle cable broke. So I was gutted from Harrogate, absolutely gutted. But it gave me the bug then to do the roads, and went back for a great number of years after that to the Northwest. Never did the TT, and that's another story. But no, the Northwest, and again there were greats there, like your Joey Dunlops and all the top British superbike guys used to go, and still do to a point. And it was a massive event. It was one of the sort of the flag events of everybody's calendar, as it were. And because of the nature of the circuit, it wasn't a TT type event in that respect. It was quite easy-ish to learn. So because it's easiest to learn, people think automatically it's safe. Well, the safety on the roads is obviously a practical thing, really. But no, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I had some fantastic races with people like Joey and that, and Philip McCallum, Alan Irwin, which is actually Glenn Irwin's dad. Yep. So it's previous generation stuff, but just magnificent play. And the people are so friendly. And there was this one lady, it was something to do with when you used to sign on in the race office, and she was kind of always there in the background. And she had on the table a pavlova, and I love pavlova, a bit of a sweet tooth. And she gave us a piece of pavlova, and I said, "Oh, it's fantastic! That's absolutely beautiful. Do you make it?" Yes.
You're like, I need a couple of these before I leave.
Well, funny you should say that, because every year I went after that, she used to come into the awning with a pavlova for us. And it was just, that was kind of the way of the people. It was just a very special place and a special time, really, more than anything else. Good memories for me.
Yeah, it was. It was again back in the I always refer to as the golden era of motorcycle racing. We didn't before traction control. And okay, I tell people this all the time: we don't need 250 horsepower motorcycles. Absolutely, we don't. Why? Because 100% of the guys, Peter Hickman and all these guys that race MotoGP, they take horsepower and dumb down the torque to go fast around the track. So we really don't need all that horsepower, right? I would love to see it get back to, it'll never go back to what it used to be, but I would love to see it take some of the electronics and the aerodynamics and all that stuff out of it and put it.
You look at the TT, for instance, and TT is 100, I think it's 188 corners, 37.7 miles round. Super difficult to learn, massive elevation changes. Again, it's just unparalleled from a technical point of view to ride the circuit. And the difference between a stock 1,000 round there, basically a 1,000cc road bike, obviously heavily modified for the track, and a super bike, which is like $250,000 or $500,000 type of thing. The mega amount of money with everything you can possibly put on it. their lap times is something like, and I've got to remember, if their lap time is something like 16 minutes, something like that, a lap time. Yet the difference between the Superbike and the stock 1000 is 9 seconds. So it kind of shows they have got to have plateaued from a power, what they can actually utilize on the track. And in fact, now what's happening is the Super Sport are catching them up almost with half the power. So it's clearly that the power scale is kind of topped out, and there's just no need. You've got to make them go around corners at the end of the day. So I'm totally with you. I mean, in fact, at the Northwest 200, they had a big thing in the late, when would it be now? It'd be, early 90s. And they actually dropped the Superbikes or wouldn't let anything bigger than 750 go there, because they realized that if they let these big 1100s and 1200s and, let the power gates open, all it's going to result in is the obvious injury statistics going down the path. So they capped it really. So you can kind of see, and it doesn't make the racing any less exciting. I try and tell people that, riding these modern superbikes is a fantastic thing to ride. They really blow wind up your skirt, Jesus. But they become so physical because of the amount of power they're putting out. And your arrival speed into corners is ballistic. And of course, with all the electronic rider aids, they're helping you out so much under the surface anyway, that you don't realize what you're getting away with. So when things do start to go wrong, it's usually irrecoverable. It's kind of like, because you've got to remember, is most electronic aids on a bike is reacting to something which is already happening. It's not proactive, it's reactive. So the slide has already happened and the electronics help to control the slide. But the point is, you're already sliding by that point. But so if you sort of take away all that electronics, you're going to say, all people are going to do is crash. Well, yes, if you just halfway around the lap turned everything off, they probably would do. But if you introduced them with no electronics, they would become the electronics. They would become the limiting factor. They would learn throttle development. I mean, I spend a lot of time with people talking about throttle development on the bike, because something as simple as applying the brake and opening the throttle makes the difference between crashing and not. And with a bike which bristles with all the torque reduction stuff and traction control and anti-wheelie, all the rest of it, the tendency is to sort of, once you've made the apex of the corner, you see riders and they look at the data and they just go full throttle, and then they let the electronics sort of thing out. Which, yeah, it's fairground riding. It's sort of, I wouldn't say it takes the fun out of it, but there's a handover somewhere between the losing the skill of riding, but actually going faster. But it's like many years ago, my dad, when he was alive, he used to have a company cars, and his early company cars, if you do like 60, 70 mile, hi.
This is my son, Rossi. Say hi.
Hi, Rossi. Yeah, my dad has company cars, his early ones. If you were doing like sort of 50, 60 mile an hour around some corners, it was like you were driving a stock car and the thing was everywhere. Where later on, you get a more modern car and you go around the same corner without anything at all, but you're still doing the same speed. Do you know what I mean? But it's all kind of hidden, the stuff. So when things do start to go wrong, often it's too late in that scenario. So I'm not knocking the traction. I'm not knocking the electronic bikes at all. But and certainly when it comes to racing, I can kind of see, like with BSB, when they do remove stuff like that, it's giving the riders back the proper control of the bike. So what you see out there is a rider riding a bike, not an electronic package controlling the situation. Because when that happens, you tend to find, you look at the MotoGP, which is the pinnacle of it all, really. And then you see at some circuits, like your KTMs are right on the money. And then the next meeting, they can't get them, beyond practice qualifying one. They just can't make the jump somehow. And it's because there's very little in it in power-wise. There's very little in everything. But they've restricted so much by what the electronics, their package is helping hinder it. And because all the riders are riding so well, the difference between these guys is so small. Any advantage becomes huge. So I love the MotoGP being an unrestricted, all singing, all dancing thing, but it kind of loses a little bit sometimes because it's more of an electronic package. You look behind the scenes. I mean, if you do a MotoGP, for Christ's sake, go to the paddock and look at these. Not look at the bikes, great, but look at what's behind them, and the mechanics and the electronic engineers, fuel engineers, tire engineers. They've all got multiple people, and your proper works teams. They will have probably 100 or more people working within the team environment to get that one guy, or if it's a duo, to get them out on track. And it absorbs a lot of cash, obviously, but it also restricts somehow, almost restricts the rider, showing what he can do. I'm not suggesting for a second that we should all race one make series, but the beauty of riding a one make series is it puts a natural cap on how much you're going to spend, no matter what level that is. You can't go beyond that because there's no point. And then what automatically you get then is the tall poppy syndrome. You get the people who will just pop their head up because they're just that bit better. You look at your top racks, for instance, in World Superbike. There's no one I feel can ride a superbike better than he can, because he's just got that X factor which allows him to just go that bit better. And the rules, the way they've got the bikes all kind of worked out, mapped out, it allows a certain capping of what is allowed, and it's great. So anyway, I went on a bit of a rant there. I'm sorry.
No, you're good, bro. Listen, everything you said, 100%, I agree with. I think that MotoGP's in like F1, it's an engineer sport now, right? With all the electronics, they'll tell you, Mike, okay, in turn 4, you need to be at 80% throttle, and you're like, dude, I'm doing at least that, right? And then they look at your data, they're like, dude, you're at 35%. But that's a whole nother type of riding, because you got to program your brain to trust the electronics, and that's hard to do versus Mike and me and you going out there and you coaching me saying, look, Simcoe, you need to do this and this and this in that corner where my bike has no electronics and I'm at, let's say, 90 horsepower, but I feel it and I'm natural with it, right? So now I'm developing my skills further. I feel like kids growing up, once they hit to that all electronic motorcycles, they don't develop as quickly because of all the riding aids, just like what you said, right? I don't want to say it dumbs it down. I just think it slows the progress, right? That's why you always heard Casey Stoner. He was so good where he'd get on the bike and was like, dude, turn all the electronics off. Let me feel what the bike is doing, what needs to be better. And then let's just slowly add a little bit of electronics instead of just dumping all this. And
I was coaching a guy in Bahrain. I did a championship in Bahrain a few years ago, Ducati championship, and there was a guy in that who was a really natural, quick rider. But he when he was downshifting, he wasn't blipping the throttle at all. So the bike didn't have a blipper; it just had a quick shifter. And the Ducati's got obviously the twin cylinder. If you downshift too fast too early, the clutch just can't cope with it all, and the bike's very often starts to tremor and pattern going into corners. So it says, look, you're going to have to not only downshift slightly later, but it says you really need to blip the throttle. No idea how to do blipping the throttle. And he was a race, I thought, well, how do you not know how to do that? And so I backtracked a little bit. I stepped away from the situation. I thought, okay, where have you come from to get where you are now? And he said, well, my first bike, full stop, was a BMW S1000. Because you're talking Bahrain, and they just go out and buy what they want, sort of thing. They don't have to go through you start with a 125 and you 255. They don't do that. They said, I want an S1000. So his first bike had a blip, had all the electronics in the world. And of course, you just ride them. He's told you do this with the gear lever when you need to do that, and you knew that would to do that, you do that to do this. Okay, and he just did it. And of course, the electronics protected him and covered him and masked everything going wrong. So of course, I had to teach him how to blip the throttle. which for me is completely instinctive, because I come from the days when, the only electronic thing you had on the bike was the kill switch.
Absolutely.
You ride a Rock 500 Moto, well, it's not a Moto GP, a 500 GP bike. And I did at Macau, and you had no help at all with them. They would either keep you going very quickly or bit you on the arse big time. And again, the electronics there wasn't any, not even a quick shifter, nothing. So I've had to go through kind of the school of hard knocks, and I don't think it's hurt me at all. In fact, when I started to ride bikes with electronic packages, I didn't really use them. I was riding them in what I call like an analog way of riding instead of a digital way of riding the bike. And for me, it was a really hard thing. You said the words a minute ago, not being able to trust the electronics. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm going around this corner, and I'm at like 55 degrees of lean, and I know I can open the throttle hard, but my brain was saying, you're just going straight to A&E if you're going to do that sort of thing. But I remember I had a BMW Gen 3 2016, and I had a really good, it was one of the first bikes for me which had a really good comprehensive ABS, traction slide, had everything sort of thing. And I thought, listen, I'm going to have to get on board with this. So I was at Hockenheim in Germany. It's a beautiful day. I've done a full day, so I knew where I was going anyway. I thought, right, I'm going to have to trust this sort of thing. So there's a few turns there. I thought, right, I can get it wrong here. I've got plenty of runoff. And the ambulance guys, they're waiting for me. So I think just go really pear-shaped. I'm going to be covered. And you can still crash, don't get me wrong. But the bike is giving you so much help on board that, you could potentially go full gas, but you would just literally run off track because it would just drive you off track. So you've still got to steer them and all the rest of it. So it's not, you can't maintain full brakes to the apex like some riders think they're doing, or I'm at full gas at the apex out coming out of corners. Really? Let's have a look at your data, because you may have the throttle on full gas, but for sure the ECU is giving you like 10-12% throttle. And this is kind of then you're into the world of making the electronic package kind of fit you as much as anything else. But first of all, you've got to get on board with that, and it's that trust issue. And I have it all the time when particularly guys who are sort of stepping up to a super bike for the first time, because you've got a big heap full of power to deal with, you've got potentially more weight to deal with, and then you've got this electronic thing, which they're kind of, for them, it's like, ooh, big scary world. And how do you get them into that sort of thing? So there's techniques you can put in place, but learning the package, learning how the bike works, learning sometimes something as simple as driving the menu system, because it can be so complicated. I mean, I'm a bit of a Luddite when it comes to the electronics, but I've been on courses to sort of learn what buttons to press and what the cause and effect of altering things is. But I've done it in a very sort of clinical, strategical way, where I've gone to a racetrack and I've used a full day just working out one portion of electronics. So I kind of know what that does, and I know what that does, cause and effect. And then you move on to something else and move on to something else. The one thing, of course, I always tell people is never do 2 or 3 things simultaneously, because you're changing too much in too short a space of time. I've digressed again. I'm sorry about that.
No, listen, this is the beauty about a podcast, Mike. It can go wherever motorcycle conversations take us, right? And it's all good knowledge to have, because people are set in their certain ways. They're like, oh, the old analog. I'm an analog guy. I believe in blipping the throttle and letting the clutch out and pulling it in to stop it doing this. And listen, to me, that's riding, right? That's you in the machine and not trusting the electronics. When I get on a full electronic bike, it's like I'm an alien sitting on top of it. You're like, what do you mean I got to do that, right? Like, I feel like when I'm out there and I'm riding these fully electronic bikes, I'm taking so much concentration away on what I'm doing, trying to go fast, remembering I got to hit this button and change this and do this and blah, blah, blah. It's like, again, we're not flying a space shuttle, right? We're racing motorcycles, and it's a simple clutch and a throttle, right? And 2 black round things. And that's what we are trying to get the best out of, right? And I always told people that if you want to slow down the motorcycles, take away horsepower and make the tires shitty, not as much grip, right? That'll be less cost effective than, dude, the millions and billions of dollars of all this electronics and aerodynamics. And then, like we said earlier, we have all this horsepower that we don't even use. So what's the point, and put it back more into the riders than anything.
Are you going to get that?
No, I'm not, dude. Somebody's trying to call. So listen, my original laptop took so I borrowed my wife's laptop, and she's got a Mac Airbook, and her phone's hooked up to this. So I try to, stop all this, but obviously it's still going on. But I'll edit that out, right? Dude, I'm getting ready. Okay, but anyway, so William Kearney says, "Did you do Oliver's mount, Mike?"
Yes. I did Oliver's mount a long time ago, 1988. I rode a. Hey, Rossi, what's up, mate?
Yeah, what's up, mate? You keep calling and it keeps coming up on here.
Oh, I was calling.
Yeah, see that?
I was calling.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. It's good. We'll just call your mom, not on FaceTime.
All right, but so can Fabian come over?
Listen, when I get done with this, we'll talk. Let me get done with the pod.
If you say yes, we got to go pick him up.
Let me get done with this, Rossi.
I know.
Okay. All right.
I was just waiting. I realized Mom didn't answer. I didn't know I was calling you.
Yeah, because her phone's hooked up to this. So just call her on your. Yeah. Okay. But thank you, Rossi. Anyway, Oliver's mount. There's a lot of people that I know raced Oliver's mount.
It was 1988. It was the. I think it was one of the last years the British Championship. We used to go there as part of one of the rounds. But for those who have been there, it's not a particularly big paddock, and because it's a country park basically, and it's a public road technically, so it comes under a road race, but it's not really a road race in the true sense of the word.
Yeah.
But I was racing a TZR 250 in the what was called a junior stock championship then, but what would you say? It's basically super sport, but the 400 side of it. So I was on a 250 Yamaha. Never been there before. Quite enjoyed it in a sense, but it's a really narrow pack in places. When the sidecars go out, they can't overtake. It's that narrow in places. Really narrow path. So if things go wrong, it goes wrong quite quickly. And I said I won the race. I had quite an unenjoyable race to win because it was pouring down. In fact, they abandoned the meeting after our race. It was so bad. And I vowed never to go back. And I've been to spectate there, but I never went back again. I just didn't. I didn't overall enjoy the event because of at that point I wasn't going road racing. So I thought to myself, if that's road racing, you can kind of stick it, sort of thing. I'd had a couple of moments. The whole thing, if it had been a dry event, it might have been I'd have come away with a completely different perspective. But because it was wet and we didn't have wet tires, we were on effectively dry tires on a really, really wet track, and it was a bit questionable. So
I guarantee it.
I have been, but I'm no fan of going back. That's for sure. To be fair, I'm saying that, but I have been back there since then. I did a couple of parades because they still race there about 3 or 4 times a year, and I went back about 4 years ago and rode a Suzuki TR 750. In fact, whose bike was it now? Not Tom Heron. John Newbold. It was John Newbold's TR 750 Suzuki. Proper factory thing. And the old school bike, lovely torquey, because it's basically a water-cooled 750 triple Suzuki. And quite enjoyed it, to be honest. I like riding stuff which is historically correct in the sense that it's not like an old bike with modern forks and all pumped out and sort of thing, because you're losing the perspective of what the bike was. Everyone says, "Oh, they're shit, them old bikes." Well, no, they were the state of the art thing at the time. In 20 years from now, we're going to look at BMW S1000 and said, you raced then? You know what I mean? Everything has its time and place. And you can never, in my opinion, you should never directly try and compare like for like anyway, because that's like comparing, your Giacomo Agostini's against your Valentino Rossi's. It's totally unfair to who was the best rider because of the time period, the bikes, the tracks. I mean, one of my favorite circuits in the world is Spa in Belgium. Now, the circuit now at Spa is a proper closed road event, but it used to be until, in fact, the first time I went there, it was actually still a road which they had to close off for us to then go racing. But when Giacomo Agostini used to race there, the circuit was about 9 miles round. They used to go to Stavlo, and it was an awesome track, but unnervingly dangerous because they were super high speed going down roads which weren't particularly wide, with zero safety, as it were. So he was winning world championships on works bikes then, on poor tires, on basically pretty shit suspension, on roads. I mean, some of the championships, and Brno, for instance, was part of their racetrack was on cobbled roads. You go into Finland, and they used to go over the railway tracks and jump over the railway tracks. I mean, and this was in the 70s sort of thing. So it's relatively not too far away. I mean, it is really when you think about it, but you can't compare riders of that era to modern riders because there's just too much gone under the bridge from that point. I mean, you look at the TT before the war, from Ramsey Hairpin over to the top to the pub, there was a gravel road, and they were still doing just short of 100-mile-an-hour laps, which blows your mind when you think about it. So yeah, comparisons you've got to be careful with. But I love riding the older stuff because you can reflect then to the riders of the time and say these guys were proper heroes. Riding these, we would call them pals of shit sort of thing, but they're not, because that was it at the time. So no, I enjoy it.
Crop. Yeah. You don't mind if we run a little bit over an hour, do you?
Oh, not at all. No.
Okay. All right. Listen, everything you said, again, I 100% agree with. It's hard, and people always want to make comparisons between, Mike the Bike and all this, and I tell everybody basically kind of how you said it. Look, the era is so different. The technology, the tires, the suspension, the brakes, the chassis, yada yada, everything was so different. You can't compare the two because how far forward in different worlds they are from each other, right?
Yeah.
Just like if you was, let's say Giacomo, let's say Mike was still alive, or Joey Dunlop, and you stick him on a 2025 BMW SR 1000R with all these bells and whistles, he'd be like, what the hell is this? And you take Valentino Rossi and you put him on freaking Mike Hellwood's bike from the 1960s, he'd be like, what the hell is this? Right? Like it's because the way you approach the racing, the way you rode the bike, the way it's just so different, man. It's not even nowhere in the same league.
No.
I also want to talk a little bit about, the Suzuka 8-hour. Been a huge fan of the 8-hour. It's such an amazing race. Unfortunately, we don't race at the Suzuka no more, except for the 8. Well, as far as like World Superbike, MotoGP, yada yada yada, right? It's all 8-hour events.
Yeah, the 8-hour obviously falls under. It's a weird race in the sense that it's an 8-hour race, so it usually falls under the endurance banner. But it's a sort of a bit of a halfway house because an 8-hour race is still a long race, but it's a short race compared to a 24. And going back in the day, in the sort of early 2000s, I was doing quite a lot of world endurance. In fact, that year 2002, we were leading the World Endurance Championship when we went to Suzuka. It come away not leading it, but another long story. But it's a very interesting race. The Japanese, for instance, all the Japanese motor manufacturers out there, I think Honda own the circuit, and they're absolutely desperate, all the Japanese manufacturers, to to win it at the end of the day. And what you'll often historically, if you look back in time, what you'll see is the Japanese manufacturers after the event at World Superbike always came on strong, because what they used to do is they used to hold back some of the technology for the superbikes because they wanted to win Suzuka. So after Suzuka had happened, they then used to allow the World Superbike guys to jump ship and put their technology in. Again, when I was saying 2002, in the riders briefing, which was a mega event in itself, I was sat right next to Colin Edwards on the left, and Brazilian rider, what was he called now? His name's jumped out of my head. Brazilian rider, Barros.
Alex Barros. Yep.
Alex Barros. And I was a bit starstruck by them. But anyway, I struck up a good conversation with Colin because he was the same name as me. And we said we're brothers, and he gave me a curious look. And I said, he was riding the SP2000 twin Honda at the time, and he was having a battle with Troy Bayliss, I think it was, for the World Championship. He was on Ducati. So I says, what's your endurance bike like? But it's a bit sluggish compared to your World Superbike. He says, hell man, he says, I'm lapping 2.5 seconds faster on the endurance bike than I am on the World Superbike. He said, I can't wait for the next round. And you go back and check those records. And from that point onwards, I wouldn't say it was a whitewash, but all of a sudden he had a real rush of form. And it was literally because they were holding it back. But it's an unbelievable event. The Japanese culture is something which you have to get your head around straight away anyway. It's an amazing, fantastic country, and I recommend anybody to go there. I'm itching to go back. But the race was particularly weird because the MotoGP calendar, when they used to go there, or the World 500, so it was back then, they used to have it early in the year, and they'd often struggle for temperature because it was often cold. And when we used to go in August, it was the hottest time of the year. When you're 8 hours on a bike, you need that like a hole in the head sort of thing. And when we did it, the start of the race at 12 o'clock on the Sunday, it was 46 degrees. Now, I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it was really eye-wateringly hot. And it was like, and a 98% humidity. It was like doing a run on a treadmill in a sauna, with a hot air fan blowing in your face. And we'd normally do in endurance at the time. We'd normally try and get over the hour before you came into pit. The bikes could do it, generally speaking, with the fuel capacity they had in the tanks. You could usually get just over the hour. Because, of course, get over the hour, you reduce the amount of pit stops you do, which obviously helps to get you to the end of the race faster. So we'd had an idea we'd have to probably cut it back a bit because of the temperature. Anyway, Jason Pridmore, which is your teammate, and hello, if you're watching, Jason, all right, mate, how are you? Lovely to see you, even though I'm not looking at you. He was a young, fit Californian sort of thing, and he was kind of used to the heat. He did like sort of 35, close to 40 minutes and come in looking like he'd been shot. And I was like a much older, white English guy thinking, I'm not going to survive. And after like 20 to 25 minutes, I couldn't see the apexes anymore. I just lost my vision. And literally I'd come down the pit lane and I couldn't tell which garage I was supposed to stop at till the mechanics were running into the track sort of stopping us. And they'd hoik us off the bike, strip me almost naked and throw me into an ice cold pool outside. And I knew I had like 15 minutes in there to try and not die, and then get dried off, get back in my leathers and thrown back on the bike. And for me, even though the race itself was an amazing event to go to, it was proper purgatory. It was just agony, the whole race, because you had no time off the bike. Because traditionally in endurance racing, you can have a maximum of 3 riders, which you can share the bike, which is fine, because then you're looking at thick end of 2 hours off the bike. But because we'd only took 2 riders there, plus, Jason was only going to do 30 to 40 minutes on the bike, that meant I had to be sort of in the pit ready to go half an hour after I just got off the bike. Which is not a lot of time when you pull off the bike. You can't even see where you're going, and totally dehydrated. And it was an amazing event, but again, it was just the punishment you took And anyone who wins that race, okay, that was an exceptionally hot year. Don't get me wrong, it was exceptionally hot. But even when it's not hot, it's still in the sort of mid 30s, so it's still bloody warm, and it's something else. And of course, you've got like guys there going there. We went there as world championship leaders, but we thought if we get in the top 10, that would be a good day at the office for us. Because of course there was like all your MotoGP. Well, I keep saying MotoGP, then it wasn't MotoGP, but all the 500 riders would be there. All the World Superbike guys would be there. So we kind of had to naturally drop in behind them because we were sort of second fiddle riders by comparison. But yeah, what a time! What a time! Amazing.
Absolutely, it's that alone is a whole separate journey in life. The 8 hours, right? And you felt a huge accomplishment when it's done and over with. I remember watching an interview. I think it was 2000, the first time him and Edwards did the Suzuki 8 hours, and from what I remember, Edwards crashed it and the bike was irreparable. And afterwards, I remember Rossi saying something to the effect like, yeah, I told Colin we need to win it the first time out because I don't want to do this again, right? And of course he come back in 2002 and they eventually won it. So it's
but all the factories, particularly the Japanese manufacturers, it was their almost sole game. That's the race they wanted to win probably more than the World Superbike or more than even the GP at the time. Their home big race was Suzuka 8 hour. I mean, it takes a lot of figuring out, but it was just staggering.
Yeah, absolutely. It just real quick, going back on the whole power thing, and that's the whole reason why we don't race 1000 cc's at Daytona 200 anymore.
Yeah, that's a track, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's yeah.
I only went once in when was it now? 1995. It was my one and only debut at Daytona on a Harley Davidson VR1000. Just come out that year, and it wasn't a great time. The bike was so down on power; it was unnerving. And when we got over there, I think we had 112 horsepower or something. I mean, it was so slow; it was untrue. And the factory said, "Look, we'll sort your motor out when you come over here, and we'll give you factory parts and different heads and this, that, and the other." And they cobbled together this motor for us, and we fired it in and went out. And they had a Bears race there, first of all, twins, triples, singles, all that. And I went out. It did 8 laps and then shit itself, the motor. So they slung another motor together for us, but it was a proper like head off that bike, barrel off this bike, and they sort of screwed it up together. And I qualified for the 200 in the front wave, which I was quite pleased about. And I can always remember I was coming out off the infield onto it's like a left-hander up onto the banking, and it's such a. I mean, anyone who's not been to the Daytona 200, it's such a weird track because you've got like an infield section which is just kind of a rather slippy kind of
just some shit thrown together, right?
Yeah, something like you're racing around a car park sort of thing, and then you come up onto the banking, which is 33 or 34 degree banking, which you're permanently looking left because of course it's got you going left all the time, and then you've got a time coming down off the banking if you leave it too late to come down, or if you come down too early. So it's all about timing, and of course having a bloody fast bike. So I was desperate in qualifying, trying to get a toe off somebody. Anyway, coming off the banking, just as you went left, Freddie Spencer on I think it was a fast by Ferracci Ducati, popped underneath us, and I thought, brilliant, I'll try and hang on to him. And that was the last thing I remember because I just opened the throttle far too early, and it sent me to the moon, the bike. And thankfully, the bike was very badly damaged, and I didn't have to have the pain of running the race sort of thing, because I'd already realised by that point we were never going to win it as long as our jackses were pointing down, sort of thing. So yeah, Daytona. I'd probably like to go back again and see it again. But you know what blew me away about Daytona as well? The beach wasn't sort of that far away, and in the evening we'd go down there to the beach, and there'd be bikes tearing them down the beach, and it was a big thing, you know, and racing them down the beach and that. And a lot of the bikers there, and we walk into the bars, and they go, "Hey, you're English," sort of thing. "What are you doing over here?" "Oh, we're racing at Daytona, the Daytona 200." And these were bikers, and they didn't know there was a bike race on at Daytona. They just didn't know it was happening.
Yep.
And I couldn't. It wouldn't compute to me that at all. So, but it's happening there, sort of thing. But no, it was a different genre of bike of riding almost. Completely weird. I'm not saying it wouldn't happen in the UK, but it was such a divide.
Yeah,
that was the thing.
But now it's better because obviously we got bagger racing in Moto America, right? Which
I can't wait to go on one of them.
Dude, come on over, man. Listen, if you ever come over here, dude, listen, my house is your house. You have a free place to stay. I live in Roto, Virginia. Virginia International Raceway is like an hour and 30 minutes. Road Atlanta, Mid Ohio, and New Jersey, 6 hours for me, and Daytona is like 11-hour drive. So, yeah, man. And I know a lot of people in the paddock, man. So if you ever get your plane ticket and fly on over, I'll pick you up from the airport and we'll get you on a bike and set you loose, right?
Sign me up.
Yeah, I will. We'll sign you up for sure. But you're right. I think before bagger racing really got big in Moto America, there was always that divide. Like they didn't really give a shit about the crotch rocket and the racing. Right now that, we have the super hooligans and the bagger class, they get to come to Moto America races, which they would never go to in the first place. And now they see what it takes, get up close personal with Sean Dillon Kelly and Jake Gagne and see all these super bikes along the $1 million Harley Davidson baggers and all this stuff. Right. So it brought them together right now. They understand it. They're excited about it and they show up. Right. And they bring it's a whole nother atmosphere. Again, we're a beautiful circus. Right. And we're such a small circus, but it's beautiful. All the people there, everybody's a family.
Biking is a family thing, and it creates a really good community. Yep. But because there's different genres of biking, it's like there's different families, which historically don't mix. I wouldn't say they don't mix well, but they just don't mix. But why not? Why can't you bring other sports together? You could, it would be an interesting event to go to where you could have like some massive motocross event at a road race with something else going on, all to do with bikes, and then have a hog roast in the evening. That'd be a good event.
That would be a proper mega event, right? Let's do it. Let's sign it up, man. Let's make it happen, right? One thing I would also love to see, man, is do like a rider exchange program. Like we can get Luke Hedger over here in exchange for one of our riders over there. So they'd be in BSB. He would be over here in Moto America. Of course, he would stay with somebody on the team and travel with the team and race a full season. I think that would also help our sport grow better too as a whole, right? Because I think it would open up more opportunities and more doors across the pond between each other, right? Just especially with how expensive racing is. I think that would be a cheaper way to do it, to get everybody else involved. But yeah, listen, Mike, we're an hour and 13 minutes. I want to ask you a couple personal questions, which this is my favorite part of the interview, right? It is to know your story, and there's so much to it. So we're definitely going to schedule a part 2. So when we end this podcast, just stay on with me for a few more minutes. We'll go ahead and get it scheduled in the books. The first question I want to ask you is what's for dinner tonight?
I have absolutely no idea. We had an Indian late on last night. We had a lot of work doing a lot of online stuff at the moment. And we kind of overrun our normal time of dinner time and thought, shit, what we're going to do. And Jennifer, my wife, who does the majority of the cooking, I like to dabble, but I'm not a cook really. She said, I'll tell you what, let's just go and get an Indian. So the local town's a few miles away. So we hopped in the car and drove down and got ourselves a carry out. So we had a nice Indian. So I don't quite know what we're going to go down that route tonight. I don't know what she's planned at all.
I love Indian food.
To answer your question, I don't know.
Indian food's great, bro. I usually get the tiki marsala, and I love spicy food. So I'm like, yeah, spice it up, right? It's good stuff, man. Good stuff. So in your career, Mike, who was the one person that challenged you and pushed you the most, and what did you learn from that?
Well, there's literally decades to look at, sort of thing, and there's within each year of racing, you tend to go through different championships. So you hook up with different people. So, and there's within every championship, you've got riders who you've got to kind of be. I mean, I've rode with one championship with XR 1200 Harleys. We had 2 years championship in the UK riding them, and they were fairly interesting bikes to ride. And Jeremy Williams was the man to beat there. Me and Jezza had lost. I finished second to him, and really, really tough guy to race with. So he was somebody I kind of respected completely. Going back into the super sport days in the sort of mid 90s, it was people like Ian Simpson was probably one of the better. He was British Superbike and Super Sport champion. He was and still is a bloody good rider now. We have had a lot of tussles together. In fact, I don't know whether you can see that photograph there.
I can.
You see that? That's me, and that's Ian, sort of back to back on the start line of a British Championship Super Sport 600 race. The body language is really interesting if you look at that as the build up to it, sort of thing. The tension, you could slice it with a knife, sort of thing. And then this is me and Ian 25 years later, racing against each other at Donington Park, and that's Ian all over. Big smile, big laughs, and yeah, he's probably one of the formative characters over the years. But it's unfair to sort of highlight two people out of 40 years of racing, because there's just so many to look at. You know, world endurance. There's a load of guys I'd like to thank for helping us out in my riding, improve me, because it's the competition which make you improve more than anything else. If you're winning races easily, it doesn't make you a good rider particularly. You're just the best of that group of riders. And that's why when riders do change classes, for instance, or they go from a club racing to national racing, they've got to take it on the chin that they're probably going to drop to the bottom of the pile again and relearn. So some of my best races I've ever had, I've not actually won, but I've learned so much from the race. And just I enjoy racing motorbikes at the end of the day. Your position, it's nice to win, yeah, obviously, but I've also won races and been bored shitless riding around. Which is, I know it's an odd thing to say, but you know, you've come across the line, yeah, thanks very much, give me a pot, I'm going home. Yeah, I felt like that type of thing. And then other races, I've been struggling to get onto the rostrum, but it's been absolutely mega. And that's a good day at the office for me. So, yeah, lots of people. There's just too many to think of, honestly. But
right.
yeah,
I know it's kind of a broad question, so yeah, it is. I'll reword it next time. I'll definitely write it down.
You've got, of course, all the roads. I've got like people like Joey Dunlop. I raced with Joey many times, and Joey was a really, I wouldn't say a complex character, but a very quiet, private kind of guy who his sole focus in the world was just to enjoy his biking and go racing. I mean, in Ireland, he was a god, an absolute god. If he ran for Prime Minister, he'd have been straight on the #1 spot. He wasn't interested, of course, but he just was so kind of relaxed. I went to Philip McCallum's wedding, and Joey was one of the guests, and he sat next to us in the evening meal. He had such a strong accent, and for those who if you want to, I listened to him talking. When he talked English, it was he had to kind of slow down. But when there was a couple of Irish guys together and they were on full chat talking, you'd not a mission. It was another language. It was English, but a form of English, if you know what I mean. And but he was such a great guy. Once you kind of got inside his kind of circle, he had this pub. I can't remember what it was called now. And when we were over at Northwest one year, we went into the pub. And it was like a scene from a really weird film, cowboy type film. We kind of walked in there, and the doors opened, and there was just a perfectly timed moment, a change of music in the jukebox kind of thing, kind of hiccuped and went on to another thing. Just as me and my mechanic walked in, and we're clearly English, We clearly walked into this Irish bar, and there was just a deathly silence. And Joey had an area or a couple of tables in the corner, sort of thing. And everyone kind of, not everybody, a few people kind of looked at him and looked at us. And when they looked at him, he went, "Aye." The music started up again, and it was all business back to you. Me and the mechanic were sweating, thinking we're going to get shot here at least if we're lucky. And no, it was all right. And all right, Joey, yeah. And it's really, but everybody wanted to talk to him, sort of thing. And it's not really, Joey didn't feed off that. He was, again, this quiet guy. And I mean, there's a lot of people do know, but there's maybe a lot of people who don't know. Behind the scenes, he would jump in his van and pack it full of toys and food and stuff like that, and disappear off out to, far side of Poland and all over to the Eastern Bloc countries, and deliver food parcels to Bosnia and places like that, on his own, and he'd just clear off. And that was, he was in a happy place doing that. And I'm kind of almost envious, really, of somebody who's like that. Put him on a bike, he'd switch into like super mode. And when I was racing with him, it was really strange. He'd kind of let you do all the work, and then just when he needed to be there, he was there, sort of thing. And wily old Foxy was that for sure.
Yeah, he's an absolute legend. It's
great bloke.
It's an honor in our lifetime, and I never thought we would see somebody beat Joey's TT record, much less his nephew Michael Dunlop do it, right? Mm-hmm. And it's yeah, TT gives me the most emotions out of any race. It's so emotional. There's so much past history. There's so much beautifulness to it. It's just there's nothing like it in the world. And I tell people that, and I get criticized because a lot of people say, "Oh, it's too dangerous," and this and that. And this is what I say to people that say, "Oh, it's so dangerous. People die. People do this. Blah blah blah." Look, they don't look at it as being dangerous. They look at it as they're doing what they love to do, right? And they've already accepted what might happen, but they don't give a shit. And they're not thinking about that. Why? Because this is something that they really, really want to do above everything else in life. This is what they want to do, right? And the people that, if that happens, the people they live behind, their sons, their daughters, their wives, their nephews, uncles, aunts, blah, 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 blah. They have had to accept that too, to a certain degree. It's just like your mama growing up. "Oh, I don't want you to ride a bike because you're going to hurt yourself. They're dangerous." But yet when she sees you finally out there and that smile it puts on your face and how happy you are, and she's never seen you be like that before, now she understands it. Does she still fully accept it? Absolutely not, because they want to protect you at all costs, right? Same thing. So I just view it differently. They just go out doing what they love to do if it happens, right? And honestly, who wouldn't want to go out doing what they love to do? I mean, let's just be honest, Mike, right? So
well, I certainly, if you had a list of things where you'd like to die, it's a really negative way to think of it, I suppose. But doing it on a bike is kind of, it's what you kind of live for. Having said that, I know at some point I'm going to get to where I maybe can't ride, or God forbid I don't want to ride a bike anymore. So I'm going to need to switch to something else. And it's that, for me, that would be the scary thing, is that, it's like you're living in a cocoon almost. What's outside of the bubble? There's so much to go in, and there's so much to do. I'm polarized, I suppose, into the biking world. But at some point I'm going to have to sort of say, let's have a go at something else. So at some point I'll have to put some thought into that.
Yeah. It's like it's like a cocoon, and you kind of stick your eye through the hole, and you don't like what you see on the other side, so you zip it back closed. You're like, "No, I'm good. I'm staying right here for as long as I can do it." Right? Yeah. Absolutely. Tell us something we don't know about Mike Spike Edwards.
Guys, that's got a bit dark all of a sudden. Something you don't know about me. Well, I like walking. I live in the Nidderdale Peak District sort of area, so it's all around us. We've got not hundreds, but miles and miles and miles of trails and walks and stuff all around us. So I like when I can to get out and do that. I like to do a little bit of trail riding, but again, opportunity is pretty thin on the ground there. I'd like to own a dog, but even I haven't got one because my wife and I's lifestyle of shooting off to do track days or races or here, there, and everywhere. It's not we're not a dog friendly bike world sort of thing. You can't take a dog to a bike event. It's just verboten. You can't do it. So it's a bit unfair to drop the dog off with somebody and that. So I'd like a dog. I like sailing, yachts. Even though I've not done it for an awful long time. I did it as a schoolboy, and again, it was something which is very, very exciting. People look at me a bit puzzled. You just stepped off a 200-mile-an-hour superbike, yet you'd like to potter along on the water in a small boat at sort of 15 mile an hour. But I tell you, when you're in a nice little dinghy and the dinghy's all humming and it's all on full song, and again, you're only doing like 10 to 12 knots. That 10 or 12 knots translates to 200 mile an hour. And it's you against nature, and you're pushing the envelope, and it's kind of exactly the same, but completely different. There's that certain amount, and the guy's kind of sailing past, and you're trying to figure out how the hell is he doing that sort of thing, just like it is on the track. And there can be, if you want it, there can be a competition element in the yachting world. Unfortunately, it is a heap of money. Whichever way you look at it, even it makes bike racing look cheap. The yachting world. So I don't know whether I'll ever afford it, but I'd love to get back into it. My brother and my dad, when I was really small, 4, 5, 6, they used to race powerboats, lakes, stuff like that. They did a little bit of offshore in the sea, but not so much because that was super expensive. But for my dad, who was basically funding it all, we basically ran out of cash very quickly. So we kind of had to step out of that sort of thing, and that's when the biking came back in, and the other wave started on the biking front. So the racing has always been inside me, but after I stopped racing or riding bikes on the road or riding bikes full stop, what am I going to do which is going to give me that same kick? I don't know. I really don't know. But sailing is pretty damn close, I tell you.
I love it, man.
There's a couple of tasty things. I don't know.
Oh man. One of my best friends told me, and ever since I heard it, I use it. Listen, we're in this together. We'll figure it out together, right? So, yeah, I feel you on that. A good mate of mine, Chase Black. What's up, Chase? He races out here. He's an absolute legend. Says, I've heard so many great things about Joey. Would have been cool to meet him, dude. It'd be an absolute, it would be. I'm not. I don't want to say I'm envious of you that you actually got to share the track and spend some time with Joey, but just to be in that presence of somebody like that is it makes you giddy like a little school kid.
You got to remember though, at the end of the day, if you cut him, he bled.
Oh yeah, for sure, 100%.
Just the blood. Valentino Rossi, if he wasn't the MotoGP god we know about, if he didn't ride a bike, he'd be delivering pizzas. Do you know what I mean? I'm not being totally negative.
No, you're right.
They're just people at the end of the day. The fact that they're mega at one sport and they've elevated themselves to that position of what they are, they're just people. So these mega stars, I suppose it can adversely affect the way they deal with themselves and other people. And I've met some really nice guys who've developed as riders, and they've lifted their profile and they've gone on to do wonderful things, and they've turned into complete assholes. And then what they've forgot, of course, was once they get to a certain peak, what's after the peak is the descent. As they come down the other side, they've had to, all those people they've stood on and shit on and been nasty to, they've met on the way down the other side, who have a completely different complexion on the whole situation. So just that because these people are who they are doesn't make them nice people or good people or better than us or you, me. So Joey wanted to be treated as Joey, not Joey the racer. And for him, you could say he was shy. Carl Fogarty was another one, to be honest. Carl Fogarty came across as a brash, arrogant, bit of a prick sort of thing sometimes, and he'll probably tell you that himself. But I think he was almost slightly shy, and what his defence is really, he put up this brash wall which you couldn't kind of get to him, as it were. But once you got to know Carl, and the other people I've bumped into like this, they're actually a very different person once you get inside their sort of their circle, as it were, and you gain the trust, or if you want to call it that. Barry Sheene, for instance, was a sort of a classic example. Achieved mega stardom, world champion, multiple world champion, was a poster boy in the UK and the world, really, right at the peak of the 70s, all male testosterone and all the rest of it. And so he'd come out of his caravan or his motorhome at the race meetings and be instantly mobbed. So he used to run everywhere and sort of not push people out of the way, but because if he didn't push past and bugger off, he wouldn't get anywhere. He couldn't be Barry Sheene. He was Barry Sheene, the superstar. I was at Nürburgring in Germany a few years ago, quite a few years ago now, when Michael Schumacher stopped racing cars and he had to go racing bikes. And in the car world, he was this hyper person who, again, he couldn't move beyond, he had to be flown in and out of places, and he couldn't move without being bombarded. Yet in the bike world, he was kind of, I wouldn't say nobody, but he was nowhere near the front. He was quite handy on a bike, but he was never going to win a race. But for him, it was just something he wanted to have a go at, to try, to push himself, to race, blah, blah, blah. And we were sat in this grandstand watching some racing at I was at the same, not in the same race team, but at the same event. I was sat at this grandstand, I'm looking at this bloke, I think, Christ, he looks like Michael Schumacher. And my wife said, it's Michael Schumacher. Now, he was sat sort of on his own, doing his own thing, sort of thing, just watching the racing and just happy as, a paying punter, as it were. That would never happen in a million years at a car event because he'd have been completely mobbed. So for him, that was a complete revelation in the fact that he could go and be Michael Schumacher, as opposed to Michael Schumacher, the superstar. So for him, again, it would have been fantastic for him to be able to do that. So I've digressed a little bit there where we were talking about. But yeah, these people at the end of the day. No matter how good or bad they are, they're just people.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I guess it comes down to that factor of you're such a huge fan of somebody, and then you finally meet them. You realize, and you laugh, and you share laughs with them, and you have a genuine conversation, like me or you are having, right? You're down to earth. You're just like me. You put your pants on the same way. You pee the same way. You eat the same way. Everything's the same, right? But you just have that piece of how do I want to say this?
It's X factor they have.
Right. The gods of speed, right? You have that certain unique ability that, I mean, I'm just gonna say we're envious of that. I'm not saying we can never reach that status, but it's something, and it's an honor to have people like you that I've followed my whole time being in the racing, watching racing, the emotions you've given me and the smiles and all that whole role goes to play. And I think that's also what creates that whole unique godly like type image that everybody sees. Like you said, Michael Schumacher, you take him out of the F1 world, you throw him in the German championship racing super bikes, they look at him, you're like, yeah, it's Mike, he races cars, but here he's just a regular bloke like me, like you, like everybody else, having fun, right? So
I remember one quick one before we go. I was doing the German Pro Superbike Championship in 99 or 99, 98, something like that. Anyway, we went to this one track, Pannonia in Hungary, and after the race had finished, and unfortunately I destroyed the bike, so I was in a bit of a gloomy hole. And we were clearing the garage out, getting ready to go, and there was people arriving for a track day for the next day. So they were kind of coming into the paddocks we were leaving. And the team owner, this guy was coming in who he knew really well, and they were talking with each other, and it's all happy smiles, pats and backs, hugs, kisses, and all that kind of. And I thought, I know him. I'm racking my brains where I knew him from, sort of thing. And the team manager who I was riding for came back into the garage. He said, "Oh, that's Tony Mang. You know, Anton Mang from the Kawasaki 250 world champion, etc." Like that. An absolute god. And he says, "Come on, so I'm going to say no." I said, "No, I can't. I just shied away from it, and I kick myself now for not, because to me, he was this iconic, godlike person, which I didn't deserve to be in his presence. Yet Tony Mang was just Tony Mang, who was Andy on a bike. That was all, and I couldn't get over that sort of thing. But I try now, because I've not got to that godlike status, but I'm worldly enough now to be able to walk up to somebody, doesn't care who they are, and to say, "All right, I'm Mike Edwards, nice to meet you," type of thing, because they will be probably more appreciative of me just breaking the ice, getting in there and saying hello, type of thing.
Oh,
So anyway,
for sure.
We digressed again. I'm sorry.
No, you're good, Mike. Listen, I'm the same way. I used to be just like that. Like, oh my God, there's Valentino Rossi. I can't approach him. I want him to sign my helmet, but I can't do it. Like, I don't know what to say because he's so much bigger than me, right? And he's so much, whatever it is.
Yeah,
that's a mindset, and I'm absolute found my way out of that. Again, that whole mental roadblock you put up with inside yourself, thinking, "Oh, they're so much better than me, and they're this and they're that," and it makes you nervous to approach them now. Like when I met Peter Hickman when at BSB, I called up, PHR Performance, went down there. They didn't tell me he was standing inside. As soon as I cut the corner, walked in the building, the freaking legend, Peter Hickman. I was like, "Bro, what is up, dude? I'm Simcoe from America." And this is what I got the whole time I was out there. They're like, "Holy shit, your energy is just intense," right? Because I'm like, "Whoa, let's go." But I had a genuine conversation with him, man. Him and his dad and his man. It was just that whole weekend. Every time I seen him, he's like, "What's up, Simcoe?" I'm like, "Bro, let's go." Dude, they're just exactly what you just said. Yeah. They're just like me and you. They just have that gift.
The first year I did Macau in '94, which is a weird environment anyway. I was in the bar of the hotel where all the riders were staying, and I could hear these two Americans rattling on, because the American vibe is so different to the European and certainly the British way of doing it. You're kind of a little bit kind of out there and a bit louder and just rowdy and that. And I kind of was feeding off it. It was quite interesting. Anyway, it was Mike Barnes, and him and his mechanic. I don't think I'd like to say there was another racer there, but I don't think there was. I think it was just Mike Barnes and his kind of team, as it were. And I went along and said hi, and we kind of chatted and that. And we'd done qualifying, so he kind of didn't know me, but he knew I was like one of the guys to sort of try and beat, sort of thing. And he was hot, was Mike Barnes. He could ride a bike, that bloke. And he was on one of these big 1200 Suzuki flame breathing straight line fast as fuck sort of bike sort of thing, but it was always going to be a tough bike to ride around Macau. Anyway, some of his terminology he was coming out with was brilliant, and I was rolling laughing at some of the stuff, and he couldn't understand why I was laughing at him. I said, "Look, Mike," I said, I'm not laughing at you, mate. I'm laughing with you because of what you're saying and the way you say it." And he was coming out little things. I remember, like you said, I was coming out of turn 9 and I was roasting the rear. And I was roaring, and he could not understand why I was laughing at it. But for us, it was something that, what are you fucking talking about, roasting the rear? You're spinning the back tire. That's what we would say. But they were kind of, they lumping you all guys together. But no, I loved it, sort of thing.
It's again, that's what makes us our beautiful circus of all the racing in the world, right? It's such a small circus. Everybody in it's such a beautiful everybody's journey. I look at everybody's journey. It's in life, right? But as far as racing goes, it's like a tree. You start off on one, you first get a bike, that's the straight, right? And then all of a sudden you start to progress, and there's branches start forming off, and there's different paths you could take within racing, whether it's dirt, trials, open roads, closed roads, a little bit of both, how you get there, the people along the way. It's that's what's make up our beautiful circus, right?
Yeah.
And just like every circus, we always have our clowns, right? And we love them just as much as everything else because they make up part of our circus. But yeah, listen, Mike, absolute honor to have you sat down. Yes, we went 40 minutes over what we originally agreed on. Just down with me for a few minutes. Once I end the podcast, we'll go ahead and get part 2 scheduled because there's still so much more we have got to talk about. But before I end this podcast, Mike, tell everybody where they can find you, where they can get you on their coaching program, where they can reach out to you and say, Mike, I want some coaching.
Right.
And all that good stuff.
You can find me on the web generally. Look for Mike Spike Edwards, and you'll be able to Google me and get me through that way. Website is www.mike-edwards.net. You've got V121 www.v121pro.com, which is my coaching website. And through those, you can kind of spider through to get most of kind of where I'm at. I have a fairly reasonable online profile, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and all that sort of thing. I don't get, my better half does the online stuff as much, or certainly all the button pressing. The content, I often do that side of it and then kind of hand over. Because when you're good at something, you kind of stick to it. And if you're not good at something, you're better off leaving it to somebody who actually knows what they're doing. Otherwise, you're just going to make a real fudge of it. So yeah, but I'm out there. People who want to go and look, I do circuit guides, which are quite handy. To give you a bit of a heads up when you arrive at a new track, shape of the track, obviously the corner layouts, where you need to position yourself, what you should be looking at, braking points, that sort of thing. Handy stuff. Got 47 of those for most of the European tracks, a few world tracks. Even got Barber as one of my circuit venues. So there's plenty to go at. There's plenty to look at.
I love it. I love it. Listen, it's been an absolute honor to sit down with the legend himself, Mike Spike Edwards. I hope you guys learned a lot. I know I did. I can't wait for part 2 because there's so much more about his career. We ain't even touched about the British side, the 400 championships, the 600 championships, the Macau, but we will definitely get at that into part 2. Real quick before I end this, big shout out and big thank you to Next Level Financial for all your financial needs. Anybody in the market for that leather suit, bisontrack.com. Big shout out to my man, Chef Eats, Flying Eyes Optics, SFL Mini GP. Mike, I got I got good mates out there in BSB. One of them is RD Racing and Jake Marsh. I don't know if you ever heard of Jake Marsh.
Yeah.
So him and Kia Walker, RD Racing and all them, they're my family over there too. Big shout out to Vet 2 Track. So I got a buddy out here, Mike, that has a program. He's a veteran. So his motto is curing PTSD one lap at a time. So he gets veterans out there on the racetrack, working with the team, that whole introducing them to our beautiful circus, right? Which is awesome.
Yeah.
64-degree racing for all your undersuit needs. Ghetto Customs. Big shout out to my man Martin at the Clothing Kings. You guys can go to clothingkings.co.uk and get all your Pendergast merch. So big shout out to Martin. I love his clothes too, by the way. BSB Barmy Army, Road Racing World Fund. I need everybody to go to the Road Racing World Fund, donate to the air fence, right? Because we have this thing out here where Road Racing World funds all the air fences, and people donate to them. It's an imperative. If we didn't have the air fences, we wouldn't be able to go racing. Just like we didn't have corner marshal workers, we wouldn't go racing. Or an ambulance, we're not racing. So yeah, big shout out to him. Big shout out to Carnes Performance, and thank you again for hooking my son up with that dirt bike yesterday. I drove all the way to Pennsylvania. It was like a 5-hour drive to buy this dirt bike for my son off my buddy that owns a dealership that also runs a team in Moto America. To me, it's important to support your local people and your friends in the industry, even if they're 5 hours, 6 hours down the road. Buy from them, order from them. Trust me, it's imperative. It helps everybody out. It's so big shout out to Carnes Performance. Big shout out to KYT Helmets in America, RTR and K-Tech Suspension. Listen, thanks everybody that watches and likes this podcast. I love every single one of you guys and girls. Stay tuned. I got 2 more podcasts happening today. You guys know you can find me. I'm everywhere. Go hit that like and subscribe bell, and stay tuned for part 2 with Mike the Spike Edwards, the absolute legend. Thanks again, Mike. Is there anything you want to say before I end the podcast?
No, other than you have to PM your email, your address, and we come over there next, hop over the pond. We can come and share a few pints.
100% we will, and you got a free place to stay too, bud. So yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, it's been freaking proper mega time. We will catch you for part 2. All right,
okay.
Yes.